something that I say along the way will touch you. I know it. Let's begin that process of crafting a meaningful life.
Here's Mary Crafts.
Welcome back to Crafting a Meaningful Life. Today is episode 239. That means for 239 weeks, we've been together crafting a meaningful life, a life that you were intended to live, a life that you want to live, a life that hopefully now you're starting down that path, that beautiful journey of being your authentic self. Remember last week I talked about, in fact, I rarely listen to a podcast, but because last week I kind of got up and out of my chair and did my sound bowl and different things and then got back in my chair and I had to I was like, what did that look like and how awkward was that? So I watched the show and it wasn't too bad. I hope you bore with me through that. But I decided that was one of my favorite episodes. I didn't know it was going to be that way, but we talked about 3 such critical issues. The first one is how to have a crazy, busy life, probably a career, children, you're married or in a relationship or not, but whatever's going on, you're living a busy life, and how to put meditation into that. And then the second thing we talked about is how to follow your intuition, how to know when your gut feeling is telling you something versus your heart intuition, and how to use that on a daily basis for real inspiration immediately when you don't have time to meditate on something. And then the third thing we talked about at the end was about self-care. And for me, that was the value of self-care. It's no longer just something we get to do to pamper ourselves and bubble baths and so on and so on. And, going to get my massage this month or this year, whichever it might be. But it's something so much more critical. And as I've watched what's happened in our current events, whether it be looking at school shootings or whether it be looking at just the divisiveness in our nation, whether it be looked as world conflict, what if and what would happen to our world if we promoted and spent all of our resources on teaching people how to take care of themselves? They wouldn't have to rely on social media and the number of likes or not likes that they get. They wouldn't have to rely upon necessarily even their peers or their parents to teach them to love themselves and to be their best selves. How do you think we solve that lone wolf that's out there that's going to come into a school and shoot? Is it by gun control or is it by teaching him to care for himself? That was so profound for me last week when I gave it. I decided I wanted to invite 2 of my favorite self-care experts on with me today to kind of explore this a little bit more and how we understand it. So please join me in welcoming 2 of my favorite people in the world, Kate Strong and Rachel Barker. These 2 fabulous women have been in my life for a while now. Kate has been on twice before. I've never had anyone on 3 times, let me say, so Kate must be pretty special. And this is my first time to have you, Rachel. So welcome, Rachel. Welcome, Kate.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for having me again, Mary.
Well, as you heard my intro, you know why you're here. Yeah. Because you're 2 real profound and prophetic people who are putting out to the world about self-care. And I recently joined, as you heard on my last podcast, I talked a little about Kate's International Day of Self-Care, which was on July 24th. And I'm going to have her talk a little bit about that. And I'm going to have each of you tell my listeners so they get to know and love you the way I do, a little bit about you and what you think brought you to this day. So Rachel, let's start with you.
Thank you so much for having me. Seriously, such a good opportunity for me to be able to, I know both of you, but I think on a higher level, be able to see people that maybe understand you. I think that that's a lot of times what we're seeking is people that get you. I hate to put people into 2 cubicles. Either they get it or they don't. And I think that a lot of times the people that get you are the people that have kind of struggled through the same things that you've gone through. A little bit about myself. I am married. I have 5 kids, 3 in-laws, like all of 3 that are married. I have 2 grandkids. And I think that when you you're a parent and you're raising these people, I think a lot of these like self-care issues that you are like not working on for yourself come very full fold. I think that your kids recognize it, your spouse recognizes it, your partner recognizes it. And that was definitely what it was for me. And I think that what it is it's past trauma that's coming up when you're like stressed, or you're under fire, you have a lot going on. You tend to act a certain way. And if your bucket is full, then things are not as heavy for you. And if your bucket is empty, then everything is a crisis. I think that, like, you can tell the Chicken Littles in the world how full and how empty their buckets are. I think that for me, my childhood played a huge role. My father had multiple sclerosis. I never knew him to walk. And so that my mom did everything for him. She got him ready in the morning, fed him, combed his hair. And to add another element is he was a school teacher and he was a football coach. And so he coached these kids, and he coached from a wheelchair. And he never was physically able to show these people how to tackle a guy or how to do anything physically, but was very articulate in the way that he told them. And they worked really, really hard for him. So his communication was really good. On the flip side, there's always people that live with illnesses, whether their parent has an illness, whether it's a mental illness, whether it's a physical illness. I call it a different personality in a relationship. I think that illness becomes a whole new personality. And so there's a level of dysfunction in your life that other people don't maybe recognize. Like, we did not do anything normally. Like, even to go to a movie took us twice as long as a normal person to go. You have to get the wheelchair out, you put him in the wheelchair, and then you go in, and then you deal with a lot of people staring at you, wondering what's going on. And as a child, that is a lot. That's a lot. And then I always dealt with this fear of people leaving or dying. I knew that he would one day die. I knew that there was no like the disease had no cure. And I knew that as a child, very, very young, that things were very much out of my control. And I think that that's a really good thing to touch on really quick, is that what we do in life is how we numb things, how we run our businesses, how we, have relationships. It's either control or lack of. I think the reason why there's addictions and why there's people that are not good at relationships, it's because we are tirelessly trying to get control. And I remember one time seeing a counselor, and she says, "You know what? I don't want to tell you this, and this might be the first time you've ever heard this, but you do not have that much power." And I just was like me trying to control my relationship, me trying to control my kids, me trying to control my house. And in those things, you develop. So at an early age in my teens, I developed an eating disorder. Why? Because it was the only thing I can control. I couldn't control my parents' frustrations, and I'm very, very empathetic to feeling their frustrations and that helplessness that they felt, and his disease declining. And so I learned to control one thing. And what that does is it bleeds into all different areas of your life, whether it's how you keep your house, how you drive your car, if the gas is full, if somebody you just want to control everything, and it becomes, your life begins to unravel really quickly. So I started working on that at a young age, and I would say that my marriage probably took the brunt of that. I think that or relationships, I think, is because I didn't trust God, so I didn't trust anyone. God was not answering my prayers to make my dad well, and then my dad ended up passing away when I was 18, almost 18. And so I'm thinking, like, you know what? Like, we have been taught our whole life, this higher power is going to help us, and knock and you shall enter, ask and you'll be, all of these things, and that didn't happen for me. So I'm just like, this guy clearly doesn't have my back. And that was a really sad formality for me, is to really be alone in every sense of the word, because I believe now that God is the head of my ship, then my relationship with my husband, and then my children, like a triangle kind of, and without that knowledge to know, hey, I hated those cliches. Everything happens for a reason. Da 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 da. These little things that people try to tell you that is supposedly he's in a better place. Just think now he's walking and running. And I did not have that same belief system. I didn't. I just thought, there's a point on Steel Magnolias where the lead character says, the little Bible girl says, "Malin, you must be so happy that she's with our Lord and Savior." And she turns to her and she goes, "No, I want her here, and I want her with me." And I don't think that anything explained the way that I feel more than that did. It's funny when people talk about grief or trauma. My dad has been gone since 1991. And if I talk about him, I talk all the time to audiences everywhere. I can keep my stuff together, except when I talk about him. And still, it just stings. And that's what grief looks like. And so I think with trauma, I think that is like the opposite of self-care. What we are trying to overcome and what we're trying to take care of ourselves and tell ourselves that it's okay. The trauma doesn't go away. We just are able to handle it differently. And I think that that's what most people, like I was telling Kate, on our podcast or on her live, is that I believe that people are walking around having jobs, having children, having relationships, all of these things, and they're internally broken. And it's so scary to fix those broken parts. It's so scary because you do have to rewind a little bit and you have to find where it started. But I think that we don't have to stay there. I think that we can figure out what happened. We can see why it affects us so much and the triggers that are coming at us. And then we can go forward. But it's basically in giving you information. I think that like that is the whole point of all of this, is that if I had a toolbox that showed me exactly what to do when these things come at me, I would respond a lot differently. And I think that that's really our ultimate goal, is trying to give people a toolbox to be able to delve into when these triggers come, when these people come, when grief comes at us, that we're able to respond appropriately. And mine has learned to practice the pause. Don't react right away, because I'm an emotionally driven person. And most of the time the pebble's right here in my eye and I've got to throw it out there to walk across it. I can't have it right here because I will not act well. I will not behave well. And so I've had to learn to really exercise that patience in order to be able to find the right emotion to fit the cause.
When I think about all the different things that I encounter with people, like at my speaking engagements or who respond to me on my podcast, clearly, and both of us, all three of us know this very well, is that number one issue that people are dealing with is that of fear and afraid of what's going to happen. And that's why we seek control. And the other thing is that because of fear, we go into this hiding mode, that we don't want anyone to see all the hurt or who we are or the crazy stuff that we've done. So we go in this hiding mode. And in hiding, there's no possibility of healing. So one of my favorite things that I say to people is the healing starts when the hiding stops. And that's one of the processes that you've gone through, Rachel, is really stopped hiding at all the things that went on in your life and opened up the vulnerability to heal. And through that, using self-care to come to this beautiful place that you are. Kate, as you proceeded into this International Day of Self-Care, I mean, who ever thought we would have an International Day of Self-Care on July 24th? You kind of set a profound thing that you wanted to accomplish. So let's start with a little bit about that. Most of my listeners already know who you are. So if you want to put any of that in there, great. So let's go with that.
Yeah, thanks, Mary, for having me. I'm so happy to be on. And Rachel, thank you for the vulnerability and sharing. It immediately connects us to each other when we can just be raw and real. And I feel even more connected with you after you sharing. So thank you. I appreciate that. I'm all lit up about self-care. And I am a single mom. I have 4 kids. And I was taught growing up that self-care was selfish. That that with a mom with 4 kids, if I went to the gym, then I was neglecting one of my kids. Or if I chose to go out and have a girls' night out, then I was neglecting my family. And so the rhetoric and what I heard was all about that self-care was selfish. And so when I found myself being completely drained and not being able to show up well for the people in my life who I love so much, what I chose to do was to shift that. And I started taking care of myself physically. That was the first pillar for me, because that's the obvious one, right? It's like, we know that it's like exercise and eating and bubble baths and manicures and those kinds of things. But as I dug deeper into self-care, I realized that the physical aspect of self-care is only one pillar. There are actually multiple pillars of self-care. And so I launched this 5 pillars of self-care for International Self-Care Day. And those 5 pillars include physical and then mental, because what we think, we become. And that mental piece of self-care is, in my opinion, probably the most critical. The dialogue that's going on in my head, the criticism that's going on in my head, the stories that I'm telling myself in my head. If we can control our thoughts in our mind, that's where the superpower is. And Dr. Joe Dispenza says that we think 60 to 70,000 thoughts a day, and 90% of them are the same. So noticing what's going on in here is a critical piece of self-care. So that's my second pillar. My third pillar of self-care is emotional self-care. I grew up in the same world that you all grew up in. And I know, especially for men, how many men did we hear and witness someone telling them to toughen up or don't cry, or if you're going to act like that, you go to your room. I got that one. You don't act like that. If you're going to act like that, you go to your room. That was just feeling emotions. And as little kids, we feel big emotions. You know, kids throw tantrums. They freak out in the grocery store if they don't get the toy that they want. And, you know, it's like, But as young kids, we felt all these emotions. We were born with all of the emotions. It's not like I chose and picked, like, I'll take that one, I'll take that one. But what happened is, as we became more civilized, we quit showing certain emotions. We quit allowing ourselves to feel certain emotions because they're not favorable. It makes people uncomfortable if I'm having a big emotion, you know, anger especially. People are like, what is she going to do with that? And so when we allow ourselves to feel all the feelings, what we do is we really curate a space for healing. And that trauma that Rachel talked about, if we're going to look at that trauma, we have to feel it to heal it. And so emotional self-care is critical to really having a wholesome life. My fourth pillar of self-care is spiritual. Now, that can be religious, although it doesn't have to be. When I say spiritual self-care, I'm talking about you connecting with your higher power, your higher self, your God, nature, whatever that looks like for you. That is a piece of self-care that has to happen, because it's important for us to know that we're not alone and that there is something bigger and greater out there, even if that's just the better version of ourselves. So that's why I've included spiritual self-care. My last pillar of self-care is social self-care. This, what we're doing right now, matters. When we come together with groups, when we come together in circles or networks or tribes, whatever you want to call it, that's the place where the real work is done and where we can actually heal. I'll share a quick story. My mom is around me and hears all of this conversation. And there was a moment when I thought, why doesn't she do the work? You know, like, why is she not doing the work? She has all the information. And I had a beautiful experience one day where I was going through my own, working through some of my own trauma. And my partner was behind me, and we were kind of in that like spooning cuddle position. And in that moment, I knew that the reason why my mom wasn't doing the work is because she didn't have anyone to hold her. And I really believe that when we have people who can hold us, we can do the work. We can work on that trauma. We all have trauma. I've not met one adult that has not experienced trauma. There's big trauma and there's little trauma, but we've all experienced trauma. And the way that we get to move through that and work through that is by having a community and a tribe, a circle to hold us. And so I'm really passionate about these 5 pillars of self-care. It's so much more than just physical. It's a wholeness. It's what Rachel said. It's a toolbox to really be able to do that. And on International Self-Care Day, I decided to gather and collaborate with 10 other people, including both of you, to talk about this and to talk about it with our youth and our teenagers and young adults. I mean, can you imagine if we would have been doing this back when we were younger? And if we had given ourselves permission to take care of ourselves, how much better can we show up for the people we love when, as Rachel said, our cup is full?
I love that. You know, Rachel, on Kate's, what do you call that you put together for YouTube? I don't know what to call it. It's not a podcast.
It was a summit. It was a self-care summit
self-care
where
summit.
multiple,
So we will include the links on the end of this podcast so that you can find Rachel, and her handles. You can find Kate and My Strong World, and of course the link for the YouTube where you can go and look at this. 10 of the most awake women that I know, and we all came together for this. So Rachel, tell me, on Kate's day of enlightenment, her summit, what pillar did you choose to talk about?
I chose to talk about the mental aspect of self-care. And I think it's people choose the things that they do is what they're struggling with the most. And I think that I've struggled the very most with the mental aspect of many things. I carry a lot of anxiety and fear, just like you said. I think that I reached a point, I think that we've all taken, whether we've been to counselors, whether we choose energy work, whatever it is that we choose to be able to help us. This past year, I've really delved into saying, hey, I really want to find the root cause of my anxiety. And I think that I just came to this point where I'm just like, I'm so tired of worrying. I'm so tired of being worrying about every aspect of life. Again, it's a control issue, right? And so when I spoke on Kate's Live, we talked about the aspect of young people and being young. And one of the things that I lacked is people talk about, go back to your inner child. And quite honestly, I didn't have an inner child. I was an adult for as long as I could remember. I remember it being very evident. We were in line to go get school pictures, and I think I was about 6. It was and I just remember this. And I remember a girl in front of me worrying about her barrettes. She was worrying about her barrettes slipping out of her hair. And I'm just I felt like looking at her well, I'm worried if my dad's going to die. My level of knowing people's, reacting to people's, how they were feeling, the tension in my home. My dad, towards the end of his life, couldn't speak, he couldn't speak because his voice had gone out, and I could read lips. I can tell you, I think that form of empathy, some people are born with it, but a lot of it's learned due to your circumstances. And one of the things that I felt as a child, and that has carried on, this is the thing that's so hard for people to realize, is that you think that, oh, that was in childhood. You're going to carry that over if you don't figure it out. I loved your analogy that if you do not do this, this is not going to stop. Oh my gosh, that was just so profound to me, because as a child, I felt so alone. I felt like nobody understood me. I felt very misunderstood. I felt like that adults didn't know how to handle me because they felt like they were dealing with a colleague or an adult that was little. And then other friends are just like, I can't even relate with her because I'm worried about going out and she's worried about going home and making sure that, everything's good. So I think that me in understanding the mental aspect with teenagers and with young people, and even going into your 20s, I think that migration from your tweens to being an adult is one of the hardest transitions that they have. It's because it's driven into us to be purposeful. You got to figure it out right now, what you're going to be, where you're going to go, especially in our culture. These young kids are I got married at 19. 3 of my kids have got married at 19. It's a bizarre culture that we live in, that you're 19. And I know that last week you couldn't figure out this, but we'd this pressure to get married. And I don't know if my kids had pressure, but it is the culture we live. They end up dating, and they marry who they date. It's not like they're playing the field in this culture. We marry who we date, And so I think that having this pressure to grow up and to know it all and to figure it all out, I don't know one person that has got their act together or even knows who they are well until their 30s. I had no idea. I was literally
or 60s. Until they're 60.
No, but I'm just saying that they don't even have an idea of what they even want. And I feel like it's ever changing. And I don't think that saying, oh, I've arrived, I am here and I know everything. I'm not there. I'm certainly not there yet. I still wonder if I'm doing things right, if how I'm making counseling moments for my kids or other people or whatever. And so I think that the pillar of mental health is one that many struggle with, but it's so taboo to say, oh yeah, I actually suffer from anxiety and depression. I'm working on it. It's going really well, whatever. But instead they're just they stay quiet. But yeah, if I showed the analogy is but yeah, when I go to get my, medication for my diabetes. I'm never embarrassed at that. I'm never like, I'm just here. Can you get my blood checked? And I also need my thyroid checked. Can you get all that checked? And we're not like, there's zero shame in that. That's our body dysfunctioning and not working properly. But what is the difference between that and mental health? If we made it more streamlined, then I don't think that there would be like, we would be able to articulate how we're feeling. The vernacular would change. And my kids have always been communicative, but there is a time. And I think that if you've ever had a teenager go through, puberty and they feel like an alien at times, it's because they have no idea what's going on with them and their emotions are all over. And I think that like at any given day, maybe I'm the same person. I think that that's why I relate so much is because I think that, especially a red personality, a type A, you want things to be in order.
Which none of us are. We're all just yellows here, right?
But I think that that's why I chose that, is I relate very well with the struggle. And I loved when Kate said is that you could be we all speak to rooms of many, many people. And the one thing that I can guarantee you about every single person in that room is that we all struggle. And that's the one thing that connects us. I love that. If it were a perfect world and we were perfect people, it would be really hard to connect, to understand the struggle. And so that's what I appreciated about that pillar.
I love that. And I think about that is the one thing that connects us, is actually not our successes as much as it is our struggles. And that's where the bonding occurs. The people that I summited Kilimanjaro with, I haven't talked with that since. The people who are working with me every day in my struggles, or, my sister, my partner, all sorts of different people who are seeing me on a daily basis, that's where the work is. That's where the hard stuff is. One thing you said, Rachel, was, I think, very profound. I'd like to talk about for just a minute. Well, there was a lot of profound, but this one just struck me when you said, feeling alone. And those of you who are listening and those of you who are watching, you see these three strong warrior women sitting here who are out making a difference in the world. And yet, please raise your hand if you have felt alone. Yeah.
And still do.
So,
I think that that's one
and
thing.
still do at times.
Yes.
Yeah.
I think that there's many times I am surrounded by the most loving, great people, and you can be in a room and feel completely alone. Robin Williams said that. He said, the biggest times that I've felt alone is when I'm surrounded by so many people that love me and are enjoying what I'm doing for them.
And when I think about self-care and about feeling alone and the different people that we see that we feel like we need to provide services for, and that they are so alone. They feel so alone. Even in gangs, as you belong to a gang because why you want to belong, so you're not alone. And you look for those opportunities. And yet the one thing that I know the most is that when I feel alone is the time I need to reach down most of all and care for myself and love myself and do something that brings my spirit up. There are times when especially when I was working and towards the end of my career, when I'd really gotten into the physical aspect of self-care, and I would just come home and just drop and be exhausted and feel like nobody else in the world understands where I am. Nobody else in the world is going through what I'm going through. And of course, everyone in the world is. But I knew that the best thing for me at that moment when I was feeling the most alone was to care for myself. And sometimes it was to get up and go to the gym and get those endorphins working and going, or go out in nature and work, or sit down and write, or whatever it was, or connect to a friend on Marco Polo. I needed to connect and feed myself. And I found that aloneness. Alone is okay. Lonely is not. I felt that leave me and be able to feel that I got this again. And what if we could teach that? to everyone at young ages. That's why, Kate, I loved that this was really, your summit was really pushed towards teenagers and preteen, to those people who are in that stage the most of developing their personalities. And God knows, when I was that age, I think I felt more alone than I ever have in my life.
So I have a couple of things I want to share before I go there, Mary. First of all, there were two men that joined us too, and I'm telling you that because one of them was extremely profound, and I'll share with you. What I also want to share with those of you who are listening or watching is we created a self-care plan that's customizable specifically for you, and it's free. As a life coach and a relationship coach, I coach people all the time. And the number one thing I hear consistently is people want to learn how to love themselves. They want self-love. I hear it every time, every time. And so I believe that this self-care routine is the beginning. This is the foundation to learn to love yourself, because in order to love yourself, you have to know yourself. And the way you really get to know yourself is by finding out what your needs are and how you're going to care for yourself. So one of the most profound things that I heard and I loved was a share by Levi Lindsay. And Levi, I worked with Levi he had a video company, and this was back when we would do live videos before the pandemic and there wasn't a lot of Zoom, and met him that way. Always saw him as the happiest, most positive, outgoing person. Well, fast forward, he had a mental breakdown in his closet one day as a business owner and entrepreneur, feeling completely overwhelmed. Pandemic's happening. He's wondering, how is he going to take care of his employees? How is he going to take care of his family? And he felt alone. It's back to what you said, Mary, this feeling of like, I'm alone and no one really understands this. So locally, we had another entrepreneur here in Utah who did commit suicide, and a group of his friends came together, including Levi, and said, we have to create dialogue and a conversation around this so that people don't feel so alone. And they created an organization called We Are Mind. In fact, if you find me on all of my social handles, you'll see that little cloud with the, like the speaking cloud, and that's a representation for those who are part of this movement. But he talked a lot about mental self-care, and it comes back to what Rachel said of there's such a negative connotation around someone needing help with their mental health. Yet we are fine to go get diabetes medicine. We're fine to go get a leg looked at that's broken or whatever it is. We go to the doctor for all these things. We also I have someone who helps me with my taxes. I have an accountant. I have an attorney. I have a group of people who support me in all of the areas that I am not a genius at. Well, guess what else? I'm not a genius at how the mind works. And so to go to someone and say, yeah.
Yeah, I was just going to say, I think I know why that is.
Tell me.
Because when you have a physical ailment of whatever it is, there's this piece that society says, oh, that's not your fault. You can put that on somebody else. But an emotional and mental problem, society says, oh, you messed up. You have a problem. You are the source of all your problems. And so we want it all to be out there, because it's someone else's fault. We're not accountable for this.
I also feel like mental is unseen. Physical is very seen. You can see people limping. You can see people struggling. It's visual, where this is not visual.
I always said that one of the big things, that obviously I overcame with the physical was the weight. And at 284 pounds, there was no way to hide that. It was a physical ailment, but everyone that looked at me said, wow, what is wrong with her? What is the emotional problem, the mental problem that took her to this point, And so if I wasn't able to handle it, I was less than, not only in my own mind, but in everyone's mind. And so there is that barrier that we at some point have to break down, that thing that I just live for now, which is oneness, that I am you and you are me. I see you and you see me, that we are the same. Even though the ailment might look different and the process and the struggle, we all are the same. And if I've learned anything in this life, it is that, that no one gets out of here. We look at other people, we think, oh my gosh, their life, if I was just them, or if I was as pretty as them, or if I had the money that they had, or if I had been born with a silver spoon in my mouth, or if I had this, then I could be fabulous. But, because of all the crap I have to deal with, I'm not fabulous,
Right? The details might look different. The ailments might look different, but the truth is we're all having this struggle inside. We're all dealing with things. No matter what the outside looks like, what's going on the inside. And I'm just grateful for a platform and an opportunity to be able to talk about these things openly and to be able to have so many thought leaders join me in this and come together. I mean, I never thought there would be 10 collaborators who came and did this. And it was just an onpouring of, I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. I want to be part of this. And then to be able to speak to the nation, to the world and say, hey, we have a resource. It's free. We will help you create a custom designed self-care program that's just for you. My intention with this program is not to be something that we start for 69 days and then it's over, like a diet. The intention here is to do something that you can sustain. So if that just means drinking half your weight in water every day to hydrate your body, and that's your physical piece, great. Do it.
Half your ounces, not pounds.
Yes, in wastes. Yes. And so whatever that might be, right? For me, I'm not going to put myself on a diet. Diets do not work for me. It literally makes my brain crazy. And all I do is focus on what I can't have. And then when I finally break down, which I always do, I eat 3 cookies versus I probably wouldn't have eaten a cookie for 3 days. So that psychological piece is something I've learned about myself. But again, this self-care practice is an opportunity to get to know ourselves. And it's not about punishing ourselves. It's not about criticizing ourselves or telling ourselves, oh, there's so much wrong with me. The truth is, how would you know? How would we know how to do this unless someone taught us how to do it? And we didn't grow up in a community and a culture that cultivated good self-care habits. Again, I was told it was selfish.
Yeah, I amen. And that I grew up in a very religious Christian home. And I remember the first time I came home and the first time I ever had an A on a paper in grade school. And usually I didn't do that well in school. And I was so proud. And my mom just said, Mary, the glory goes to God, not you. And I was just crushed. And that was the last A I got until I got in college and away from that, you know what I mean? And I remember the first day I said, you know what? I think I don't have very many pretty features about my face, but I think I have nice lips. And that was the one thing I could think of that I had that I thought looked normal. And my mom said, Mary, we don't focus on how you look. The glory is always to God. And that just beat my spirit down day after day into thinking that I was nothing. And to be able to come together and to find my authentic self and to move into self-love and to move into saying, I'm okay. In fact, I'm not only okay, I'm a badass woman with purpose, grace, and grit. And that, for me, is at this age to be able to say that and own it and to teach others how to do that is the greatest thing that I can do right now.
Mary, I think that one of the things that you talked about really quick, I'm sorry to interrupt, that is so vital is you saw the way you, like how that made you feel. And you really quickly learned, I bet you in any form of conversation, you recognize maybe that this person might be feeling a little bit insecure, feeling a little bit not ready, for whatever they're doing. And I think that you're probably the first to say, oh my gosh, look at you. And I think that that's one of the things that I learned is that what the things that we, and it's overused and it's over cliched, but it really is true. What we needed so badly when we were younger is what we truly give. Like, I think that what we needed is somebody, Kate, you said it, we needed somebody to hold us and say, hey, you're going to be okay. Even if they were lying, we needed somebody to tell us you're okay. Even if they were lying, we didn't have anybody to tell us you're good. You're okay. You're all right. I mean, I don't even know how many times I've told grown people or like, oh my gosh, look at you. And I think that that's one people wonder, and they ask me all the time, what is an icebreaker? When you walk into a room, what makes you just feel like, oh my gosh? And I immediately say, look at you. If you say, oh my gosh, there you are, you immediately break the ice and make it about someone else. And you've found a topic of our conversation, and they're going to come to you and they're going to open up and they're going to be, rather than here I am. It's okay to say here I am. We've all had our moments where we said here I am. But when you say there you are, you automatically make a connection of like, I see you. I can hear what you're saying. I know what you're doing. You're doing good. And I think that whether you are 5 or whether you are 85, you need to hear that. You need to hear that. And so many times we mention our struggles, and we have that other person on the other side say, well, you know, it's worse in Africa. But I'm not in Africa. I'm here and I'm struggling right now with this thing. And I remember as a small child, and I'll remember it always. I wasn't really like, we didn't go to church a lot. Football was our religion. But I remember going and I can't remember what happened, but like I felt sad. And this older lady said to me, she says, it's okay. You're okay. And she like patted my back. And I literally I was okay. I was I think I hurt my knee or something, and I was bleeding still. I didn't need the Band-Aid. I didn't need anything else, but she told me, hey, you're okay. And I have tried to do that with people along the way, just say, or that I see you, I get you. And one of the things I've had to learn in this whole realm is to talk less and listen more, because you're going to find out very quickly what it is that makes people tick, what makes them hurt, and what makes them thrive. You know, you're going to know really quickly. And one of the things that has helped me in my most dire times of my life, people wonder, like, why do you do what you do? Why do you serve? People want to know why. You guys, my despair is mixed up in every one of those events. My sadness, my feeling alone, my trauma, my grief. Every time I serve, there's a big piece of grief in that serving, is where I just saw somebody else struggling. I struggled, and I want to help them because nobody helped me. And so really that's why we do what we do.
It is. You know, as we wind down today, I want to go back for my listeners to a thought that Kate shared of we all just need someone to hold us. And if you're listening and the thought crossed your mind, I would like someone to hold me not expecting anything in return, to hold me unconditionally, to find me beautiful and worthy just the way I am. Where do I find that? And the thought I would like to leave with all of you today is that the way that you find that is first with yourself. To hold yourself, to really physically put your arms around yourself and say, you're okay. You're in the middle of it, but you're okay. And you're going to get there. Just like Rach said, when I speak at groups and afterwards they come up to me and go, oh my gosh, Mary, I someday I hope that I'm like you. And I love how you do this. And I love how you do this. The very thing I say to them right back is, you see that in me. And love that in me, because it already lives in you. And the smiles that come over their face as they realize that somebody sees that. So that's the second step that comes out of self-care, is that then we care for others. Thanks for being with us today. And thanks to both of these fabulous guests, Kate and Rachel. And we'll include their hashtags and the YouTube link and everything so that you can find them and follow them more. I follow them every day, and let me tell you, they lift my life every single day. And I love you. I love you for being part of my life and for putting out there to the world what we need and what has helped you and the struggles that we're in. And that's how we craft a meaningful life. Namaste.
Listen to the full podcast today and subscribe on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and more. Crafting a Meaningful Life with Mary Crafts.